Welcome, night owls, to another chilling story. Tonight, we venture to a mysterious farmhouse that feeds off of people's fear and grows on the tales and legends that surround this eerie farmhouse. They called it the Widow's Farm, though no one remembered who the widow was or when she'd lived there. The farmhouse had stood on the edge of town for generations, rotting away in silence as the land around it withered. Overgrown grass and thorny brambles had swallowed the paths leading up to it, and twisted trees loomed over the structure like sentinels. People in town whispered about it, sharing stories of strange lights in the windows, voices heard on moonless nights, and animals that strayed too close, never to be seen again. It was the summer before college when Ben, Katie, and Derek decided to explore the widow's farm. Ben was the daredevil, always eager to chase a thrill, while Katie and Derek tagged along reluctantly, lured by the adventure and the chance to debunk an old ghost story. Armed with flashlights and a couple of old cameras, they set out at twilight, joking to keep the nerves at bay as they waded through knee-high grass toward the decaying farmhouse. The moment they set foot on the property, the air seemed to change, thicker, heavier, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. They exchanged uneasy glances, but pushed forward, drawn by the unsettling allure of the house looming before them. The windows were shattered, blackened like empty eyes, and the wood was faded and splintered. Yet, the place felt strangely alive. Inside, the farmhouse was eerily quiet. Dust blanketed every surface, yet the air felt charged, humming faintly, as if the house were holding its breath. They split up, agreeing to meet back in the living room in 15 minutes. Derek took the kitchen, its countertops still lined with rusty ancient utensils, while Katie ventured upstairs, and Ben stayed on the ground floor, exploring the empty rooms. It started almost immediately. In the kitchen, Derek felt a chill spread through the room. He turned, thinking he saw a shadow slip past the door.
Katie? Ben?
He called, his voice echoing in the emptiness, swallowed by the silence. But no one answered. When he tried to leave the kitchen, he found the doorway had changed. The hall he'd entered from was gone, replaced by another room, one he hadn't seen before. The walls were covered in old faded wallpaper, curling and torn, yet strangely familiar. Panic tightened in his chest as he took a step back, then another, watching in horror as the room seemed to stretch, expand, twisting around him. Upstairs, Katie wandered through a corridor that twisted in impossible angles, each turn leading to another identical hallway. Her footsteps grew faster, each step echoing louder than the last. As the wall seemed to close in, she could feel something watching her, breathing down her neck, though every time she looked back, there was nothing but empty space. She turned one last corner, expecting the stairs, but instead found herself facing the same hallway she'd just left. Her heart pounded as she realized she was trapped in a loop. And Ben, he was in the living room, or at least what had been the living room. Now it was nothing but darkness. Walls covered in thick, oozing stains. The floor creaked beneath him, as though something below were shifting, waiting. When he tried to move, he found he couldn't. His feet were stuck, held by the floor itself, as if it had come alive, wrapping tendrils of wood and rot around his legs. Desperation set in. They each tried to scream, to call for each other, but the house swallowed their voices, muffling their cries in its suffocating grip. Doors shifted, hallways stretched, and the house seemed to grow larger, expanding with each terrified breath they took. In the walls, they heard scratching sounds, soft but insistent, as if something were clawing its way toward them, eager and hungry. Hours passed, though time felt warped, twisted like everything else in the farmhouse. Katie eventually stumbled into a room she hadn't seen before, a small, decayed bedroom, the bed still made, with moldy, rotting sheets. She approached it cautiously, and in the darkness, she could just make out shapes under the bed. human shapes. Skeletal, hollow-eyed faces stared up at her, their mouths frozen in silent screams. She stumbled back, realizing with horror that the room was littered with bodies, bones twisted in the walls, embedded in the floor. Derek found himself in a similar room, this one littered with photographs pinned to the wall, old faded images of people who looked strangely familiar. His hand trembled as he held one up to the light and saw himself, Katie and Ben staring back, their faces distorted, eyes wide with terror. He dropped it, heart racing, as the walls around him seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, steady, hungry, waiting. Ben, still stuck in place, felt something shift beneath him, something wet and pulsing. He looked down, and in the dim light, saw the floor writhing, tendrils snaking up his legs, pulling him deeper into the floorboards. He screamed, thrashing against the hold, but the wood was too strong. And then he heard it, a voice, faint and echoing, whispering his name, calling him deeper, promising relief.
Rest.
One by one, they disappeared, swallowed by the farmhouse, as if it feasted, absorbing their fear, their very essence, their final breaths. By dawn, the farmhouse was silent once again, its hunger satisfied, the walls settling back to their unnatural stillness. There was no sign of them, no trace of Derek, Katie, or Ben, except for a few photographs that had appeared on the walls, tucked among the others, their faces frozen in eternal terror. The farmhouse waited patiently, knowing it would only be a matter of time before someone else would wander in, curious, daring, unaware that it was not abandoned at all, but alive and hungry. And in Hollow Grove, the people would whisper of the widow's farm, its strange curse, and the stories of those who went inside, never to return. Until we meet again, my fellow night owls, under the cover of darkness.